This film is a terrible adaptation of Wuthering Heights, but as fan fiction, it might actually work. After receiving an Academy Award for Promising Young Woman and the viral success of Saltburn, adapting Wuthering Heights, a beloved English novel with Gothic elements, seems like the best logical step for writer and director Emerald Fennell. Especially with her previous work having themes such as revenge and classism, themes that are very prevalent in Wuthering Heights. And with Charlie XCX doing the soundtrack, this adaptation did pique people's interest, including mine. And now that the film is released, it is taking the internet by storm, and not necessarily in a good way. Receiving a lot of mixed reviews, we are breaking down the film and the discourse surrounding it. By the way, welcome to Tea and Popcorn, where we spill the tea on all things movies. My name is Megan, and welcome to this virtual tea party and movie club for the film girlies. I was going to drink an English breakfast tea just to go on theme, but unfortunately I didn't have any. So we are going with a spiced tea, but since this adaptation is pretty spicy, I think it does go along with the theme. It's hard to talk about Wuthering Heights and its controversies without the context of the novel that it's based on. So I'm going to dive into that first, and there will be spoilers for both the novel and the 2026 film. So without further ado, let's dive in. The novel is written by Emily Bronte, was published in 1847. It's a story about two families, the Earnshaws and the Lintons, and the story spans multiple generations. But the story mainly focuses on the Earnshaws. There's Mr. and Mrs. Earnshaw, their son Henley, daughter Catherine, or as she's known by her nickname Cathy, and the family's foster son Heathcliff, who is racially ambiguous, but his origins are unclear. But there is speculation that he might be Romani or Spanish. Just know that he is brown or tan, but definitely not white. There is also the maid Nellie, who spills the tea on the family's business, and she narrates most of the story. In the start of the story, the kids are very young. Mr. Earnshaw loves Heathcliff, and soon Henley becomes very jealous of Heathcliff and starts abusing him. However, Heathcliff and Catherine grow a strong bond regardless. Years pass, the parents die, and Henley is now married and is the new master of Wuthering Heights, which is where they live. And he forces Heathcliff to become a servant. The Lintons live in a nearby property, Mr. and Mrs. Linton, and their children Edgar and Isabella. One day, Heathcliff and Catherine spy on them. Catherine gets bitten by their dog, and the Lintons bring Catherine in, but they don't invite Heathcliff in. Time passes, the Lintons come to Wuthering Heights to visit. Edgar and Henley make fun of Heathcliff. A fight breaks out. Henley banishes Heathcliff to the attic, and Heathcliff wants to seek revenge. Henley's wife then gives birth to a son and dies in childbirth. Edgar proposes to Catherine, which she accepts, but then she confesses to Nellie that she really does love Heathcliff, but she doesn't want to marry him because of his status. Heathcliff hears a bit of the conversation and misunderstands it, so he leaves for 3 years. Catherine is depressed. However, she does end up marrying Edgar, and 3 years later, Heathcliff comes back, and he is rich all of a sudden. Heathcliff goes to seek revenge on Edgar by flirting with Isabella and really playing into her infatuation with him. Edgar, seeing what is going on, especially with Catherine, excited that her childhood crush is back with a glow up. He's just like, no, I'm done with Heathcliff's crap. And he banishes Heathcliff. Catherine is depressed and refuses to eat, and she locks herself in her room. Henley is still at Wuthering Heights, except now he's an alcoholic and a gambling addict. And with Heathcliff seeking revenge, he exploits his addictions, and he ends up eloping with Isabella. He secretly visits Catherine, who is now pregnant, but they don't have an affair or anything. Catherine later gives birth to a daughter who's named Cathy, but dies shortly after. Obviously, Heathcliff is very distraught and depressed, and he wants Catherine's ghost to haunt him. He continues to torment Isabella. Isabella ends up leaving him because he's still caught up with Catherine. She finds out that she's pregnant with a son named Linton. Henley dies, and his son inherits Wuthering Heights. And the next part of the story is Heathcliff tormenting the next generation, being Henley's son, Catherine's daughter Cathy, and his son Linton. And he just tries to manipulate the situation. I'm gonna stop right there because because this doesn't really go into play when it comes to the film, but just know that the man power trips, so the story does explore generational trauma. What Ray Reads has a very great summary of Wuthering Heights, so check that video out after this one if you want more of a detailed explanation. One of the biggest controversies about Emerald Fennell's take on Wuthering Heights is how much it's different from the book. But a lot of people are saying, well, why don't you just read the book? I think it's really cool to see film adaptations of books. I personally enjoy seeing an actor's take on a role and how the director and screenwriter takes the words on a page and transforms it to the world of film. And it's hard to become 100% accurate because people tend to have an idea about what a character looks like. But when it's done well, it's done well, and when it's off, it's off. When it comes to Wuthering Heights, at the time of this recording, I actually read it very recently, about a few weeks ago, so it's still fresh on my mind. I actually read it in preparation for this film, and while I didn't really care for the book personally, I actually do like it better than the movie. This is far from a beat-to-beat adaptation of Wuthering Heights. Instead, this feels like Emerald Fennell's passion project. She was introduced to the book in school when she was 14 years old, and she couldn't stop thinking about it years after. She wanted the film to embody her feelings of the first time she read the book. And while watching some interviews with her, she is very detail-oriented when it comes to the visuals of the film. She worked with editor Victoria Bodell, who also did Saltburn. She also brought back cinematographer Linus Sandgren, who did Saltburn, as well as Babylon and La La Land. The opening title sequence alone, it took 9 days to film. It actually used pieces of Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi's hair to create the sequence. So yes, there's a lot of detail that's out there, and it's actually very impressive. And the film's title does have quotation marks, suggesting that this is going to be a loose interpretation of the source material. The official trailer advertises it as inspired by the greatest love story. That is half true. It's a very dark book. For this story, we have Mr. Earnshaw, Catherine, and Heathcliff that makes the Earnshaws, alongside Nellie. There are also some freaky servants in this. There's no Mrs. Earnshaw, and there is no Henley, which I found very interesting. Instead, Mr. Earnshaw's characterization is more like Henley's, being that he's an alcoholic, abuser, and a gambler. At first, I didn't like this change, but it does work in the world of the film, especially because this film also talks about Catherine's relationship with her father. The Lintons are made up of Edgar and Isabella. Fennell's adaptation is more so a commentary about class instead of the intersections between class and race, with mostly colorblind casting, with Shahzad Latif playing Edgar and Hong Chow playing Nellie. But of course, we have Jacob Elordi playing Heathcliff, which I will get into later on. I'm very shocked that Emerald Fennell decided to not explore the intersection between race and classism, especially because she did touch upon those themes in Saltburn with the character of Farley. I'm also very surprised that she didn't really lean into the themes of revenge so much, especially since she has experience with that with Promising Young Woman. Instead, she takes the story of heartbreak and revenge and really does turn it into a freaked out Romeo and Juliet of sorts. The film also references Romeo and Juliet too. There are similar story beats to the beginning of the film, with minor changes that I don't mind, but the tone changes in the latter half of the movie with significant changes. Fennell is not afraid of shock value. The novel Wuthering Heights was controversial at the time of its release, regarding its depictions of cruelty, classism, and its revenge storyline. And I wish Emerald Fennell did lead into those controversial elements of the original. And like I said before, Emerald Fennell can do revenge. She does revenge very well. I find that the shock value for this film is more in terms of the sexual nature of it, with its BDSM imagery, the film's opening scene to a public hanging and debauchery going on, and other odd scenes in the movie like people sensually touching eggs and putting fingers in fishes' mouths. But I think this film is pretty mild compared to Saltburn when it comes to these shocking elements. The biggest change of the film is Heathcliff and Catherine do have a sexual affair while she's married to Edgar and pregnant, and the film is way more sexual than the book. There's a difference in tone and context. When Heathcliff marries Isabella for revenge, they end up having a dominant and submissive relationship. In one scene, Isabella acts like a dog, and she does that in front of Nellie when she comes by. It's very uncomfortable. This is so freaked out. Like, huh? Even though you could argue that he emotionally abuses her and tries to humiliate her, she is really into it. At least that is my interpretation of it. So I don't know. It just really does feel like a freaked out fanfic. It really does. It's 50 Shades of Heathcliff. I was thinking a lot about this scene, and you could argue that this could have been a coercive relationship. But at the same time, this film is very subtle in its depiction of it. And a victim's response to coercion can look like consent. So I just want to put that out there. So that is another interpretation, and an interpretation that I actually do agree with to a certain extent. Catherine does get depressed towards the end of the movie. She ends up locking herself in the room like the book, but instead she loses her baby and dies of sepsis. Heathcliff does find out and holds her corpse while there's a montage of their relationship playing. That's where the movie ends. There's no future generations. This is just like a Romeo and Juliet type ending. And this was such a missed opportunity for Emerald Fennell to explore generational trauma. Like, I'm so disappointed. This film was 2 hours, so if the film did have the same runtime, but explored the generational trauma, especially with the younger generations of the Earnshaw Lintons, I think it would have been fantastic. With this adaptation, Fennell changes the context of these pivotal scenes and pivotal elements of the book, which is frustrating for fans of the novel. And that was frustrating to me while watching the film. Which brings me to the controversies and discourse surrounding this film. Jacob Elordi's casting as Heathcliff, who is described as a man of color. And when this casting announcement came out, people were already talking about the whitewashing of this role. And the majority of the previous adaptations, the role of Heathcliff has been played by white actors, with the exception of the 2011 adaptation where James Housen played Heathcliff. But my hot take as far as this adaptation is Jacob Elordi was the perfect casting choice as far as optics. Heathcliff gets whipped. It is not explicitly shown, but it's still a disturbing sequence. And young Heathcliff says that he is willing to take the abuse for Catherine. And then there's a match cut with Heathcliff's scars as he's older, of course, Jacob Elordi. And there's a lot of scenes showing his back. It's kind of shown as kind of like sexy scars too. Oh gosh, this is so cringe. It's shown that he's willing to sacrifice his body for Catherine and take this abuse. It's supposed to be like this romantic thing. But I'm just thinking, yeah, this is released in Black History Month. Earlier in the week, just experienced the Bonita Bowl, Bad Bunny's Super Bowl performance, which is truly a cultural moment, whether you're Latino or not. It was everything. So no one is trying to see a person of color get whipped on screen. I don't think the culture is ready to see that. Another thing that happens is young Catherine calls him a pet. Like, we are not trying to see that. And yes, the abuse happens in the book, and he is described as a pet, but he's not explicitly called a pet by Catherine. So I'm just trying to think within the grand scheme of things, especially in these times talking about representation, regardless of the depictions within the book, and if the scripting is literally the exact same, I just think it wouldn't be a good look, especially since the story is surrounding an affair. It's very much like servant fantasy and romance novels. Obviously, I'm speaking this from a perspective of a Black woman, and if, for instance, a Black man or a biracial Black man was cast in this role, the optics will look very suspicious. I don't know, this might be a reach, y'all, but I think Jacob Elordi did give a great performance as Heathcliff, as well as Owen Cooper as young Heathcliff. But I think the whitewashing in Hollywood is a problem, especially regarding book adaptations. And not only that, but just also be mindful of who these characters are and how they're depicted on film too. We almost never see romantic male leads of color. Hey, heck, even women. Let's be honest. So I think this whole situation is almost a straw that broke the camel's back. But I hope we keep this energy up for other adaptations. Like, no hate on Jacob Elordi. He's trying to get a check. But I think we should hold casting directors accountable because actors of color do need work too. As far as the colorblind casting for Edgar and Nellie, I think it's fine. I really don't have much to say because there's really nothing to say. Their race really does not have anything to do with the script. So I really can't say, oh, okay, this is fine in this case. Oh, this is good representation, bad representation, so on and so forth. Because ultimately, this film is not about racism. And I would say the same thing about Jacob Elordi too. Like, this film is not about his race or anything like that. So it's just like, okay, it's fine in this context if it's not played by a person of color, and also considering the dialogue too. There were some comments how Emerald Fennell doesn't really understand the book. This also brings me to these conversations about double standards. And for this instance, I believe that two things can be true at once. And I often have this take because it truly isn't that black and white. When men adapt a novel and it strays away from the source material versus when a woman does it, namely Emerald Fennell. Some people are talking about the backlash towards Emerald Fennell regarding the whitewashing. Yes, there is a double standard when it comes to women producing art. It does get more criticism and harsher feedback compared to men most of the time. But at the same time, we should be able to critique a director's work regardless of gender. But I disagree that people are calling her out of her name or saying that this is a self-insert. And I truly don't believe this is a self-insert. And I want to make one thing clear. When I say this film is fan fiction, I'm not using it in a derogatory way because this film truly is fan fiction. She is a fan of Wuthering Heights and she decided to do her own interpretation of it. But instead of writing it on a forum, she made a movie out of this. And I personally think that if a man put out this project, it would get a similar reaction. But we never know because this is Emerald Fennell's project and this is her baby. And I personally think that Wuthering Heights is poor source material if you want to make it into a love story or a lust story in this case, because the story is about codependency and revenge. I saw a comment on Threads that mentioned that this movie should have been titled something different, for example, Kathy. And I really like this idea, and I do see the double standard when it comes to women having to really be so clear that a film is a loose adaptation. But I just think the expectation going in will be a lot different because I do feel like the quotation marks are a little bit too subtle, especially if there is going to be significant changes to pivotal moments and significant changes to the tone of the movie. I agree with a lot of the internet discourse. If she wanted to make a horny story, she should have just made a horny story and not attach Wuthering Heights to it. And I do think that women need to just make more horny stories. That would be the feminist thing to do. With separating the film from the book, I think this film does feel like a romance novel come to life. I even look at the movie poster and it's giving romance novel. I would actually have that movie poster in my home, but then when I invite guests over, they're gonna be like, oh, do you love that movie? And I'm like, no, I just like the poster. But yeah, the graphic designers totally ate when it comes to the posters. Even the alternative poster, I really love it. Ironically, this does show Emerald Fennell's talent of writing original stories, even though this is a loose adaptation. I would have enjoyed it more if the intent was more explicit instead of just the quotation marks of Wuthering Heights. But with the added context, after doing some research, I'm like, okay, I do see the appeal. I personally enjoyed the soundtrack with Charlie XCX. The overall film score, I thought it matched the vibe of the movie. I also really like the costume design, despite it not being historically accurate. I do like the creativity with the production design as well. Aesthetically, this movie is amazing. I just love it. It's a nice movie to look at. It really is. Even with the more bizarre elements, it's pleasing to the eye. I personally don't think that I will revisit this film, but I do admire Emerald Fennell's world building. Objectively speaking, it is a bad adaptation, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is a bad film. And even though I disliked it, I would not call it a bad film. So who was this film made for? Maybe this film wasn't made for us. This film probably was a passion project of Fennell's, and I think that is totally fine. I feel like in some point of a director's career, they always make a passion project. This might have been a film for a wider audience compared to Saltburn and Promising Young Woman. Saltburn, which was more of a sleeper hit. Promising Young Woman was popular in award circles. I actually saw it on opening night on Valentine's Day weekend, and there was a lot of couples going for Valentine's Day probably, and people doing a Galentine's thing. This film is for people that like dark romance. That's the vibe. I think that audience will really enjoy it. I think cinephiles are going to be divided with this. It's pretty much divided between me and my mutuals. Some of us love it, some of us hate it. So it really just all depends on your taste. Some people are thinking that this is more style over substance. I personally agree with that to a certain extent, even though I cannot stand that phrase. But I do wish that the film did go a little bit deeper when it comes to the themes. But I do like how the film does show how their relationship flourishes and the importance of that. If you did enjoy the film, that is valid. And I think if you hated the film, I also think that's valid. We're all different people with different biases and taste in movies. That being said, I really would love to hear what you have to say, because I really do enjoy talking about this movie and hearing different people's perspectives. Give this video a like if you like the vibes, and subscribe to join the virtual tea party and movie club, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on the latest video. And I will see you at the next party. Bye bye.